Hello, my name is Nerdbrain, or Ilayasan, depending on what game I'm playing, and I play Symmetra. A little too much. And today I'll be doing yet another discussion all about one of Symmetra's abilities. Or, this time, not an ability, but a vital aspect of her gameplay. Her gun, or, more eloquently, the Photon Projector. The Photon Projector is a unique weapon in Overwatch. While there are others with similar hitboxes and aim requirements, the method of actually dealing damage with it and the minigame involved with keeping it at maximum power makes for a distinct flavor in gameplay among the cast, exclusive to Symmetra. I'll start by going over the basics and the stats, and then get into the intricacies of each of the modes of fire and how to best utilize her weapon in her gameplay. The Photon Projector has a maximum of 100 ammunition and a 1.5 second reload time. Holding down the primary fire input, bound to left click by default on PC, projects a hit scan beam in front of Symmetra that extends up to 12 meters in front of her. The beam's hitbox is 0.25 meters wide. Holding the beam out drains 10 ammunition per second. The beam will damage the first target it intercepts and halt any forward movement upon hitting a target. The beam deals 60 damage per second. After hitting a target for a total of 1 second within a 1.5 second window, the beam will level up to stage 2. Indicated by the 3 lights on top of the Photon Projector, the arms of the projector extending outward, and an increased audio pitch while firing the beam. At stage 2, the beam's damage is increased to 120 damage per second. After damaging a target for a total of 1 second within another 1.5 second window, the beam will level up again to stage 3. Stage 3 is the maximum charge level of the beam, at which it deals 180 damage per second. If the beam does not damage a target for 2 seconds, the beam will decay back down to stage 2. And if it does not damage a target within another 1.5 seconds, it will decay back down to stage 1. Like all other beam-type attacks, Symmetra's primary fire is not blocked by matrices, and will damage directly through any matrix-type ability. Damaging a barrier or shield health with primary fire will cause the Photon Projector to regenerate 10 ammunition per second instead of spending it. Doing this also causes Symmetra to regenerate a portion of her shield health. The amount of health regenerated scales with the current stage of the beam, 10 HPS at stage 1, 20 at stage 2, and 30 at stage 3. This health regen is not associated with the passive regeneration of shields. This passive does not accelerate the regenning of shields, but rather is simply a separate healing effect applied on top of any other healing or passive health regeneration, meaning it can stack with the natural regeneration of her shields. This regen can only restore Symmetra's shields, the blue portion of her health bar. For most intents and purposes, this is irrelevant, but under some certain conditions, it is possible to not receive any healing from this passive despite not being at full health, if only white HP is missing, but all shields have been restored. The primary fire is unable to deal critical hits. The beam will also temporarily deal less damage than normal when first damaging a target. The math behind this is 1, complicated, and 2, not explicitly stated or elaborated on fully by any official source. But this is mostly irrelevant. This just serves to prevent the player from dealing damage faster than normal by rapidly tapping primary fire instead of holding it down, or moving the beam off and on an enemy hitbox back and forth to deal damage faster than the normal 5.2 ticks per second. All that to say that the player must maintain good tracking in order to achieve maximum damage. You cannot cheese it. And just to clarify how beam charging actually works, most sources will simply say it takes 1 second to level up each stage, 2 seconds to decay from stage 2, 1.5 seconds to decay to stage 1. But this actually works a little bit differently. You do not need to be damaging a target consecutively for an entire second in order to charge the beam. Essentially, every 1.5 seconds, the game will check what percentage of that time the beam has been damaging a target. And if the total contact time is at least 1 whole second, the beam will level up. This is mostly done just that you don't have to have literally 100% perfect accuracy to ever level up the beam. At perk level 3, Symmetra is able to select the perfect alignment perk as one of the options. This effect will increase the range of the Photon Projector's primary fire by 15% each charge level. Holding down the secondary fire input, bound to right-click by default on PC, will begin charging an orb. Releasing the input will fire the projectile. The projectile's size, damage, and ammo cost will scale based on the amount of time spent charging the attack. The projectile has 2 hitboxes, a direct hit and a splash hit. Landing a direct hit will deal the combined damage of the direct hitbox and the splash hitbox. The orb can deal a minimum of 5 damage on the direct hit and 5 from the explosion, up to a maximum of 50 from the direct and 50 from splash, for a total maximum of 100 damage per projectile. The projectile size scales from a minimum of 0.115 meters to a maximum of 0.575 meters. The explosion radius scales up to a maximum of 2 meters. The projectile speed is a constant 50 meters per second regardless of charge level. The orb takes 1 second to fully charge, but may be held down for an additional second before automatically being released. A minimum charge orb costs 1 ammo to fire, and a fully charged orb costs 10. The ammo is drained as the orb is charged, not as the orb is fired. Because of this, interrupting a charge midway will still consume ammunition. The scaling is based on time spent charging, not the ammo spent. If there is less than 10 ammunition remaining, a fully charged orb may still be fired. The ammo draining will simply pause at 0. So long as there is at least 1 ammunition remaining, a fully charged orb may still be fired. Only the center of the projectile has map collision. This allows the player to fire orbs through tight windows, cracks in the walls, or around tight corners, so long as the center of the hitbox is not intercepted. Unlike her primary fire, the orb projectiles are affected by matrix abilities, but just like the primary fire, the orbs are unable to land critical hits. Symmetra's primary fire is the strongest tool in her kit, and is the cornerstone of the design philosophy behind her gameplay. Symmetra's primary fire has the capability to output a sustained flow of incredibly high damage, but the ability to utilize this power is impeded by her lack of mobility, range, and the micromanaging of her beam's charge level. The key to success of Symmetra is maneuvering around her limitations to set up scenarios where she can unleash her full strength. The biggest limitation on Symmetra's beam is of course the charge mechanic. At stage 1, the beam is rather weak. For reference, 60 DPS is less damage than pretty much every other beam type attack. Winston's Tesla Cannon, Moira's Biotic Grasp, Zarya's Particle Cannon even at 0 charge, and after the mid-season 14 patch, even Echo's Focusing Beam on targets above 50% HP, without the buff. If you initiate combat with an enemy by simply holding down your primary fire, the enemy practically has a full second to react to you freely as you're doing such little damage. And at stage 2, dealing 120 DPS still isn't the most threatening. So even if you're the one to start the engagement, the enemy still sort of has an advantage, since you're giving them about 2 seconds to react before they actually need to be really concerned about how much damage you're dealing. And that 2-second window before you really start doing damage is assuming that you have 100% perfect tracking. In most scenarios, it's gonna be slightly longer than that before you really start pumping. Because of how weak your beam starts out, it's very advantageous to look to amplify the beam before going for your real target or even before engaging in combat at all. One way to buff up your beam ahead of time is by targeting enemy deployables, and particularly barriers. By targeting deployables to charge the beam, the first time you actually damage an enemy, your beam will already be outputting 180 DPS, which gives the target much less time to react and dispatch or evade you. This can be done out of range and view of enemies by hitting a stray pedal platform or a barrier clipping through a wall, but this can also be done directly in front of enemies as well, like by hitting a Reinhardt or Ramatra's barriers. In this circumstance, you're also actively contributing to something while charging your beam, as you're applying pressure to the shields, which will allow for follow-ups from the rest of your team. Hitting barriers is even more advantageous due to Symmetra's sort of unofficial passive ability of her beam regenerating ammo and shield health while damaging enemy shields. This isn't actually a passive effect officially in-game, and instead it's a property of the primary fire itself. But Symmetra doesn't have any other passive abilities, so for the sake of brevity, I'm just going to refer to this as her passive and call it Shield Leech. Shield Leech regenerating ammo basically means that there's no downside to charging up on a barrier, as you won't begin combat with less than maximum ammo like you would by damaging other types of deployables. The beam can be amplified by hitting any target that gives a hit marker. All enemy barriers, turrets, traps, bombs, walls, platforms, and constructs will give beam charge. Keep in mind that it also doesn't matter if you're actually dealing damage, just that you're hitting a target. This means that you can still gain beam charge by hitting an invulnerable target, such as an enemy standing in a Baptiste Immortality field, an enemy being gripped by Lifeweaver, or an ulting Zenyatta. Note that enemies affected by Kiriko's Suzu do not grant beam charge, as they aren't just invulnerable to damage, but are completely intangible, like how a Moira or Reaper are when they use their Fade or Wraith form. Another way to charge your beam ahead of time is by first going for an easier to hit enemy before attacking your priority target. Tanks have giant hitboxes that are incredibly forgiving and easy to hit. Due to this ease of hitting them, by targeting the tank first, you can ensure that it takes the minimum amount of time to fully empower your beam, 2 seconds, whereas trying to hit a smaller or faster target can create downtime that makes it take longer to reach stage 3. Something very important to note about the beam is understanding that the targets that are the easiest to charge off of are not the easiest to kill with the beam, even when fully powered up. A lot of sim players make the mistake of recognizing that barriers and tanks grant free beam charge, but then spend all game trying to melt tanks and shields, leading to a Symmetra with very high damage done, but very few total eliminations. Applying pressure to barriers and tanks is strong. It can force the enemy team to fall back or spend defensive cooldowns early. But even at max charge, it's going to take several seconds to melt down a tank's health bar, especially when you take into account movement, crowd control, defensives, and healing, whereas you can melt enemy squishies in just over a second. You're going to want to look to charge your beam up on the barriers and the tanks, but then switch targets to enemy squishies once you're at full power. There are, however, some exceptions to this rule, particularly in regards to one of the beam's biggest strengths: the fact that it's, well, a beam. Beam attacks in Overwatch completely bypass all Matrix abilities. The term Matrix Ability is a fan term used to refer to a particular type of damage mitigation in Overwatch. The term is coined from the first of these types of abilities, D.Va's Defense Matrix. Most mitigation in Overwatch either directly nerfs the damage done through damage reduction effects like Orisa's Fortify, or creates a barrier that takes the damage in place of the user. However, matrices, and yes, I had to Google the plural of matrix for this, create an area of effect that completely deletes all projectiles that enter their range. Anything that touches them is simply deleted, or eaten, as it's often called. Anything except for beams. Against certain heroes that rely on matrix abilities to mitigate damage, Symmetra is one of their biggest counters. While normally it's best to build your beam off of the tank and then swap off of them, against certain heroes like D.Va that have literally no way to mitigate your beam damage other than her armor, it can sometimes be more valuable to just prioritize demeching her at all costs so that she literally cannot play the fucking game. Sometimes though, if the enemy D.Va is getting all of the attention from her supports, your max stage beam, even completely unblocked, can still take a long time to dispatch her. So if that is the case, you can simply just go back to swapping to the enemy supports and she'll be completely powerless to defend them. The other character that Symmetra's beam completely devastates is Sigma. Just like all other matrices, Sigma's kinetic grasp is completely unable to block your beam damage. But unlike D.Va, he has no armor to protect him, and if you play well into Sigma, he literally cannot touch you. If he puts his barrier up, you'll just gain free beam charge off of it and melt it down. Sometimes good Sigma players will instinctively take down their barrier the second they see you charging off of it, but even if this prevents you from building your beam, his barrier isn't up, leaving him and his teammates vulnerable to the rest of your team's attacks. He's basically damned if he does, damned if he doesn't. So his barrier gives you free beam charge if he keeps it up, and his team is in danger if he tries to prevent you from charging off of it. And his kinetic grasp can't block your beam, and you have shield leech up the entire time while fighting him from his barrier and because half of his health is shields. The only tool he has to stop you is his accretion, which you can easily block with a turret with a little bit of practice. TLDR, as Symmetra, you should be the reason why a D.Va or Sigma main logs off. Before I move on to the other limitations of the beam and their workarounds, I want to mention one more tank matchup. Zarya. Just like Sigma, half of Zarya's health is shields, which gives you a big advantage while fighting her due to your shield leech passive. And her bubbles count as a barrier as well, so damaging them does give you shield leech. However, you do need to be very conscious about hitting the bubbles. If you treat Zarya bubbles like any other barrier and hit them willy-nilly, then you and your team are going to end up fried on the floor. You can hit the bubbles to charge your beam and gain shield leech, but you must do this carefully. Avoid hitting the first few bubbles that you see Zarya use at the start of the fight. At this point, she isn't really looking to actually get in range and attack your team. She's just trying to gain energy for the fight ahead. By damaging the bubbles in the poke phase, you'll get your beam charged up, but then she'll just disengage. Your beam decays back down to stage 1 for maximum in 2.5 seconds. Zarya's energy decays by 2% per second after 2 seconds of not gaining energy. If you give her 2 full bubbles worth of energy, 90 energy, she will be dealing significantly more damage for over 30 seconds. Zarya gains energy from blocking damage and then retains that power for a long time. Symmetra gains energy from dealing damage and is only able to maintain it by continuing to stay in combat. Basically, while it's tempting to see the bubble and go, ooh, free beam charge, if you're not going to be able to immediately use the charged up beam, then you've gained nothing from the interaction. During the poke phase, when Zarya is just fishing for energy, do not hit the bubbles. During the active fight, when she's using bubbles to intentionally block damage from killing her and her allies, you can more freely hold down your beam to gain some shield leech and keep the pressure on. When doing this, try to focus her and her supports down quickly, as to not let her use the energy that you just gave her, and so she doesn't escape and fall back, as she will then begin the next fight with some free energy. The other big limitation on Symmetra's beam is its relatively short range paired with Symmetra's limited movement. Symmetra's primary fire has a range of 12 meters. With the exception of Winston's primary fire, which, I mean, isn't really a fair comparison since that's like a cone-shaped thing and not a straight line like the other beams, all other beam attacks have a 25 to 66% further range than Symmetra's. This, alongside Symmetra's lack of quick movement options, makes it hard to get in range to attack enemies and easy for them to escape. Unlike with Symmetra's first iteration back in 2016, enemies can't simply just literally hold W to escape your beam's range, but with pretty much any speed buff or burst movement ability, they can easily just leave. There are a few different solutions to this. For starters, it's good to prioritize targets that aren't going to simply be able to just walk away from you. Low mobility squishy heroes, particularly supports like Ana and Zenyatta. You can also focus on trapping enemies in range of your attacks. This can be done with help from crowd control and obstruction from your teammates, such as target Roadhog hooks, someone on a slept, or an enemy walled off by Hazard or May. Your turrets are also very useful for their slowing effect to keep targets in range of you as long as possible. And of course, the other option if you can't bring the enemy to you is for you to go to the enemy. This can be done by simply pushing up with your tank and fighting on the front lines, by teleporting to the enemy backline, chasing down a fleeing target with your teleporter, or by flanking around with your teleporter as well. But what is especially strong is using speed buffs from your allies to simply run enemies down. This is an extremely strong and easy technique to pull off, but it does require communication and cooperation with and from your teammates. This is easiest and most effective when in voice chat, but it can also be done without it if that isn't an option for you. Simply type out the plan to your teammates ahead of time. But this will of course be less consistent and effective, as your teammate will have to eyeball it and not have explicit instructions from you. This is strongest with the big 3 speed buffs, Lucio, Juno, and Junker Queen. But Kiriko can also speed you up with her ultimate, and with the introduction of perks, a lot of other characters have on-demand speed buffs now as well. Roadhog with Invigorate, Zarya with Spotter, and Kiriko, again, with Foxtrot. Instruct your speed booster to save their cooldown for when you're ready. Build up your beam's charge, and as soon as you're all buffed up, have them speed boost you forward. It's pretty simple, but very effective, and feels amazing when you can successfully just fucking run over the enemy team with your car. The Perfect Alignment perk can also be used to mitigate the limited range of your beam by increasing its range by 15% per charge level. Okay, so the wording of the perk doesn't specify if the increase in range is 15% of the base value each time, or 15% of the base value for the first level up, and then 15% of that value after. I'm not sure which way it is, but whatever way it actually works, the math basically puts it at the exact same spot, slightly less than 16 meters. This perk can be really strong, especially into flying heroes like Pharah and Echo. You still won't be able to shoot them out of the sky with a long-range beam, but you'll have more leeway and wiggle room to damage them as they first take off or as they come back to the ground to refresh their cooldowns. However, keep in mind that this isn't a flat range buff, it's tied to your beam's charge level. Meaning, yes, it can enable you to hit further away targets, but you still need to hit a closer target first to gain the range buff. There's also the opportunity cost of not taking shield battery to keep in mind with this perk as well. Most of the time I like to just run shield battery for added bulk and longevity, but I will take perfect alignment when paired against flying heroes. Lastly, the other way to mitigate the limitations of range and mobility is to just get pocketed. Symmetra is naturally bulky with an above average max HP of 275, a lot of shield health that regenerates faster and sooner than normal passive health regeneration, and the ability to self-heal her shields through her shield leech passive and her shield battery perk. But despite all of that bulk, sometimes the best counter to Symmetra is just looking at her, taking her out really quickly before she has the chance to ramp up. And the best counter to getting attacked is, well, getting healed. Symmetra is one of the best pocket targets for Mercy, and no, I'm not saying that just because I play her and want to get pocketed just like every other DPS main. She does really high damage, and boosting that further is very powerful. Additionally, because of her limited range, Symmetra has to get into the thick of it in order to be at her most effective. Many healers have difficulty healing allies deep into the fight due to their healing getting blocked by ally and enemy hitboxes and barriers. But one of Mercy's biggest strengths is the lack of limitations on her healing stream. While it's not the highest healing in the game, it is a constant flow of healing that cannot miss or be physically blocked by the enemy, allowing Mercy to keep Symmetra alive deep into enemy territory where she would otherwise be completely fucked on her own. Do not misinterpret what I am saying. Do not harass your healers, do not yell at them, do not beg them, do not demand anything from them, do not assume yourself more important than the rest of your team, and do not perceive yourself as superior to your healers in skill or quality of character. Rather, when communicating with your team, explain to your healers that if they assist you directly, you will be able to go in deeper than you could on your own, and get more done. Request assistance, do not demand it. Whenever you get full beam charge and intend to go in further, a quick call of, "I'm at max beam, keep me up," can change the tide of battle. And, be sure to thank your healers and compliment them on a good hustle or clutch heal. Positive reinforcement reproduces success. Symmetra's secondary fire is not nearly as powerful as her beam in total damage output, but it functions to fill the gaps in power left by her beam. The beam is limited by its lack of immediate power and short range paired with Sim's limited movement. The secondary fire orbs are fast-moving, long-range projectiles that deal significant amounts of burst damage. Where the beam fails, the orbs succeed. The beam has a very limiting range of 12 meters. The orbs have an unlimited range and no damage fall-off. They travel at a rather fast 50 meters per second. They do have some significant travel time, especially at long distances, but because of the lack of damage fall-off, with proper aim and prediction of enemy movement, they effectively have no range limit. Basically, if you can't beam an enemy, you can orb them. And range isn't the only weakness of the beam that the orbs patch up. The fact that they deal 100 damage instantly in a burst rather than over time like the beam does makes them have higher damage output in certain circumstances, mainly in regards to armor. Armor in Overwatch is a type of hit point that has special damage reduction properties. It is indicated by the yellowy-orange health on the health bar. Whenever armor is hit, it reduces all instances of damage by 7. A body shot from Cassidy, for example, deals 70 damage to basic white health, but will deal 63 to armor. If the instance of damage dealt is less than 14, the damage is instead reduced by 50%. This means that when an attack is made up of multiple small instances of damage, such as a shotgun blast from Reaper, Roadhog, or Torbjorn, armor is much more effective. So while the total damage of a Reaper's shotgun blast would be 108 damage, the armor does not just reduce it by 7 down to 101. Instead, each of its 20 pellets deals 5.4 damage, so each pellet is reduced by half, doing 2.7 per pellet, for a total of 54 damage, half of the base total. So the idea behind armor is that it's supposed to be more effective at mitigating small, rapid instances of damage than it is at large chunks. But with how high the damage per second for most beam attacks is, each tick is doing more than 14 damage. So armor wouldn't be working as intended. So to compensate, they made it so that all beam type damage and damage over time effects are reduced by a flat 30% when damaging armor. All that to say, armor reduces your orb damage by 7%, but reduces beam damage by a whopping 30%. However, because of how big the disparity between max stage beam and orb damage is, even with the large armor reduction, third stage beam will still be a quicker time to kill than just orbing down armored targets. But orbing down armored targets is higher damage than stage 1 and 2 beams. So if you are not already at third stage beam, you should try to hit an armored target with an orb before building your beam off of them for a faster time to kill. Generally, if you're not already at max beam, you should open with an orb against any target you intend to focus for the same reason why you want to build up your beam first before engaging. Taking a chunk of health away before the enemy notices you gives them less time to react. Basically, an orb is always more threatening than a stage 1 beam. Against heroes with 250 or less health, just landing right clicks is a faster time to kill than beaming them down starting from stage 1. However, this is part of the game of playing Symmetra. While it's quicker to right click them down, you have to use stage 1 and 2 beams at some point if you want to be able to use stage 3. So you have to weigh your options a little bit. If you're in a duel with one enemy support or DPS, just land your right clicks. But if you're in a team fight and want to be able to take out the first target and then ramp up your damage to be more valuable for the rest of the fight, you will have to temporarily lower your damage output at some point in order to achieve maximum value. Something else to keep in mind is comboing your quick melee with your right clicks. Meleeing right after firing an orb will slow your total rate of fire and overall DPS, but at close range this can allow for extra burst damage to finish off a low health target. This is particularly useful when your team's Ana lands asleep on someone slippery like a Tracer, as you'll be able to output more damage before they're able to react with recall. Back in Overwatch 1, when orbs did 120 damage instead of 100, and the breakpoints were lower as Tracer and Baby D.Va only had 150 HP instead of 175, this combo was a lot more important. Now it is much weaker, as you can't actually one-shot combo anyone with this without damage amps. But it's still useful to keep in mind in the back pocket as a way to finish off a low health enemy at close range. Okay, so that's why the orbs are good, but how do you actually, do stuff with them? Actually landing your beam is a lot simpler than landing the orbs. It's a hit scan beam in a straight line in front of you. You put your crosshair on the enemy, and it does damage. Keep the crosshair on them, and they die. The orbs are much different, as they are a projectile and not a hit scan. A hit scan attack in a video game basically means that when the player presses the input, the game immediately checks if there are enemy hurt boxes overlapping with the player's crosshair. If yes, then the attack lands. If no, it does not. Any visual of bullets or beams flying through the air are just that, a visual. Projectile attacks function more like a real-world bullet. An object is shot forward from the player that travels through the air at a certain speed, potentially and eventually colliding with a target. Because of this, in order to land your orbs consistently, you must aim where the enemy is going rather than where they are. The speed of the orbs is fast enough that at close enough distances, the difference between where they are and where they're going to be is so small that it's practically the same. But as the distance from your target grows, you must compensate for this disparity. Now, obviously, it is going to be impossible to calculate exactly where the enemy will be moving, and to know if they'll maintain maximum walk speed the whole time, know which direction they'll go, know if they're for sure going to use a movement ability, or if they'll stutter step. It's simply something that you're going to have to get a feel for. After playing this game long enough, you still won't know the math of exactly how far a distance is and how fast people are going at any point in time or whatever. But you will eventually intuitively have a feel for how fast your attacks are, how fast people move, and in what way they're going to move, and be able to predict the timing of their cooldowns. I cannot tell you this is exactly how you are going to be able to know where people are going to move. It's something that you're going to have to learn over time. But there are some tools to help in expediting this process. So there's this workshop code made by Cactus Puppy back in Overwatch 1 that was a training mode for landing Brigitte's whip shot. But just by fucking with the settings a bit, I have modified this into a game mode for practicing Symmetra's right clicks. Feel free to fuck around in this mode and get a feel for landing your orbs on moving targets from various angles. And there are a few extra steps you can take in your gameplay to ease the difficulty of landing your orbs as well. So I've pretty much mentioned this in all of my videos, but it bears repeating. It is easier to land Symmetra's right clicks on targets below you rather than on targets that are above you, due to the increased chance of potential splash damage. For example, when trying to hit a far off flying above you, your right clicks can either hit her directly or miss her entirely. But if she's on the ground and you are above her, you can still hit her directly or miss, but a close miss will incur some splash damage from the orb exploding on the ground below her. So when trying to hit enemies with your right clicks, seek high ground to take advantage of the increased splash damage chance. Basically, if you cannot get to a position to beam down enemies, you should always be looking to use your teleporter to reach high ground to aid in poking enemies with your right clicks. High ground spots can also grant access to off angles that let you hit enemies that would otherwise be protected by barriers or map geometry. Even if you're not getting picks while doing this, actually landing the orbs instead of whiffing them or hitting a barrier will generate ultimate and perk charge and soften up targets for follow-ups from your teammates. You can also take advantage of aiming lower to the ground for higher splash damage chance while on equal level with the enemy. Neither mode of fire on the Photon projector can land headshots, so you lose nothing by aiming towards the lower half of the enemy hitbox instead of at their head. If you whiff past their head, you do no damage, but if you hit beside their feet, you deal a little bit of splash damage. And lastly, while I have emphasized that the beam is a higher maximum value tool for Symmetra, even when you have stage 3 beam, your right clicks still have their uses. Try your best to avoid downtime while firing your beam. Oftentimes I'll see Symmetra players, myself included, lock in a little too hard when their beam is fully charged up and will continue holding down primary fire even while targets are invulnerable, out of line of sight, or out of range. In all of these circumstances, doing this is just wasting ammo. Instead, you could use that downtime to charge up an orb and continue beaming as soon as you release it. Enemy Moira or Reaper fade away, stop beaming, wait a moment, charge up an orb. Enemy May goes an ice block, stop beaming, wait, charge up an orb. An enemy walks around a corner while you're chasing them down, continue following them but stop beaming when they break LOS, and as you approach the corner, charge up an orb. Release it as soon as they're back in line of sight. An enemy uses a movement ability to leave your beam's range. Don't just beam the air and hold W in vain, use your orbs to finish them off. Come to think of it, the orbs are basically the same thing as the move Future Sight in Pokemon. You spend a turn to use the move, and then 2 turns later it actually hits, and can effectively combine with your attack from that turn. In Overwatch, you can spend 1 second charging up the orb while the enemy isn't able to be hit anyways, and then unleash it alongside your beam once you have an opening. And that's all I've got. I want to take this time in the end slate to just say thank you again for all the support I've gotten in the past few months. I've really enjoyed having this creative outlet, and I'm really glad that you've all been liking the videos as well. Also, thanks for your patience with uploads, especially for these more intensive, long-form video essay type videos. Real life has been crazy, and I play other games too, and World of Warcraft is particularly heavy on the time investment. Anyways, I hope you found this information useful. Good luck in your games, and use it well. And like and subscribe or stuff, you know. Or don't. I'm not your mom. Do what you want. Just like all other major Cs, Symmegma. I cannot.